He stood there trembling, ribs poking through matted fur, one leg dragging like it had forgotten how to move. A thick chain scar wrapped around his neck like a memory that refused to fade. The metal gate clanged shut behind him, and the noise in the auction barn didn't stop. It just shifted. It wasn't shock. It wasn't sympathy. It was the kind of silence people gave when they saw something broken and didn't want to care. Whispers traveled fast. "He ain't worth the feed." "Bet he bit somebody." "Probably used for fights. Leave him." The auctioneer, usually a booming voice full of grit and urgency, hesitated. Even he couldn't sell this. The dog stood alone, trembling slightly, but holding still. He didn't bark, didn't whimper, just stared into the crowd, as if searching for someone who might give him a reason to breathe. The crowd didn't move. Some turned their heads. Others laughed. No hands rose. Not a single one. The auctioneer sighed, tapping his gavel toward the exit. "All right, move him out." A hand went up. No voice. No shout. Just one quiet hand raised from the shadows in the back. The crowd turned as if someone had spoken blasphemy. A black man stood there, dusty overalls, heavy boots, worn denim jacket. No hat, no badge, no expression. Just eyes locked onto the dog like they'd already met. The auctioneer froze mid-sentence. Bid accepted." People looked confused. Someone muttered, "Why would he want that dog?" No one answered. The man didn't explain. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate, boots crunching against straw and gravel. The dog flinched, but didn't run. Their eyes met. One pair exhausted, one scarred by more than just pain. The man crouched just a few feet away. Didn't speak. Didn't reach. And the dog, barely breathing, limped one step forward. No drama, no music. Just two souls left behind by the world, recognizing each other. He didn't speak a word on the ride home. The truck groaned as it moved through empty Texas backroads, tires grinding over gravel and dust. The wind whipped through the cracked window, but the man didn't roll it up. He kept one hand firm on the wheel, the other resting in his lap, calm, steady, silent. In the back, the dog lay curled in the corner of the truck bed, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. His eyes never fully closed. Each bump in the road made his body twitch, his ribs flinch like he was bracing for something worse. Not the cold, not the pain, the memory of what came after. The man glanced into the rearview mirror, not to check the road behind him, but to check on the animal that refused to rest. He hadn't given the dog a name yet, but something inside told him that when the time came, the dog would choose it himself. The cabin sat at the edge of a dying town called Bluewood, a place where people only came when they had nowhere left to go. The mailbox was rusted. The porch leaned like it was tired of standing. Pine trees circled the place like old guards who'd seen too much and stopped caring long ago. He parked, killed the engine, and got out. Then he walked around the back, knelt, and held out his hand. No words, just patience. The dog didn't move at first. He stared at the man's palm like it might suddenly become a fist. But after a moment, one long, cold moment, he inched forward. Not because he trusted him, because he had no choice left. The man scooped him up gently, cradling him like something fragile, something sacred. The dog didn't resist. He didn't whine. He just trembled, soft and hollow, like a soul trying to stay inside a broken shell. Inside, the air smelled of old wood, burned coffee, and ash. The man laid him down on a folded blanket near the stone hearth, added an extra layer of towels, and stoked the fire until it cracked alive. He sat across from him, silent, watching. The flames danced in the dog's eyes. Still, he didn't sleep. Still, he didn't close his eyes. There were pictures on the mantel, a folded flag in a wooden case, a younger version of the man standing tall in uniform, and in the corner of the frame, barely noticeable, a different dog, German Shepherd, proud, strong. But that one was gone now, like everything else. He got up, went to the kitchen, and warmed up a bowl of chicken broth, placed it near the dog. The dog didn't touch it, didn't even sniff, just kept watching, waiting for something to go wrong. The man didn't push, didn't command, didn't raise his voice. He just sat on the floor again, hands resting on his knees, breathing slow. After 20 minutes, the dog's head lowered, not asleep, just tired. The man looked at him, then whispered, barely loud enough for the fire to hear, "Moses!" The dog twitched. One ear moved. "Moses," the man said again. "That's your name now." No tail wag, no bark, no reaction. But something in the air changed. The kind of shift only silence can explain. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like it was exhaling. Inside, two living things shared the same space for the first time, not as master and pet, but as two survivors hiding in the same shelter. The man leaned back, arms crossed over his chest. He hadn't brought anything or anyone home in years, not since the last time he trusted something he shouldn't have. Not since the badge on another man's chest turned into a weapon that took his entire life apart. But tonight, with a half-dead dog in front of him and ghosts in the walls behind him, he didn't feel as alone. Morning came slowly, the kind of morning that doesn't knock. It just slips through the cracks and waits to be noticed. Frost clung to the edges of the cabin windows, and the fire had burned down to glowing embers. The man stirred first, his boots resting by the hearth, his arms crossed, head tilted back against the wood-paneled wall. He hadn't slept much, not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to. The dog was still there, same position, same look in his eyes. That look that said, "I'm still here, but I don't know why." He poured a mug of coffee, black and bitter, then knelt and set down a bowl of soft food, chicken, rice, and a little bone broth. The dog didn't move, not until the man sat on the floor beside him again. Only then did the dog inch forward, one hesitant movement at a time. Not like he was hungry, but like he was checking if it was a trick. He took one bite, paused, looked at the man, waited. No slap, no shout, no sudden movement. So he ate again. But even while chewing, he kept one eye on the man's hands. It wasn't just hunger, it was survival, and survival didn't let you trust too easily. Later that afternoon, the man stepped outside to split wood. As the axe came down, the thud echoed through the cabin walls. The dog flinched, ran to the darkest corner, tail tucked, body shaking. The man didn't follow. He just waited. Let the silence settle again. That night, the man sat beside him again, this time with a brush. "Just want to clean you up, Moses," he said softly. He moved slowly, brushing from the head down the spine, avoiding the back legs. But even then, when he got near the hips, the dog jolted. Teeth bared. A low, throaty growl. Not to attack, to warn. The brush dropped instantly. The man didn't move, didn't yell. He just knelt, palm facing up. It took minutes, long, painful minutes, for the dog to step forward. And then, gently, he rested his snout in the man's hand. The man nodded, not like he won something, but like he understood. "All right," he whispered. "That's enough for today." Later that evening, the man boiled water, tore old towels into strips, and began wiping the dog's paws. When he touched the back right leg, he felt something strange, an old burn mark. Then another, round, precise, not from accident. This was intentional. Someone had tortured this dog. He didn't say anything out loud, but his hands shook. Not in fear, in rage. He didn't pet the dog. He didn't promise anything. He just stood up and stared at the fireplace, jaw locked tight. The dog watched him carefully. Still, he didn't flinch. He just laid his head down again, eyes open, watching the man the same way the man had watched him. 2 lives, same storm, different scars, and for the first time the man realized he wasn't the only one trying to heal from something people didn't see. Before going to bed, he took the brush and placed it on the floor beside the blanket. No pressure, no demand. "Tomorrow, if you're ready," he said softly. The dog didn't respond. Not with a wag. Not with a sound. But he didn't look away either. That was enough. The wind had changed. Not outside. Inside. The man could feel it in the way Moses began watching the front door less, and the man more. Like he was finally starting to believe the violence wouldn't come from inside the house. Not anymore. It was on the 4th day that something shifted. The man was cleaning Moses's leg again when he noticed a small bump under the skin, right near the base of the neck. Barely noticeable, but hard. He narrowed his eyes. "Hold on now," he muttered, gently running his fingers over the spot again. A microchip. He wrapped Moses in a blanket, drove into town, and walked into the only vet clinic he trusted. One that didn't ask questions unless you asked first. The receptionist didn't even glance up until she saw the man and the dog. "Oh, that's a new one," she murmured, eyes falling on Moses's scars. They scanned the chip. The computer beeped. What appeared on the screen made the vet's face freeze. Moses wasn't just any stray. He was registered under a now-defunct K-9 law enforcement training program, one that had been shut down for disciplinary failures and inhumane conditioning. The man leaned forward. Who was in charge? The vet hesitated, then read the name aloud. Sheriff Clay Maddox. The room went still. The name hit him like a knife. He hadn't heard it in years, had prayed never to hear it again. Sheriff Clay Maddox, the same man who once called him boy in front of a room full of white deputies. The same man who laughed when he reported a fellow officer for choking out a black teen during a bogus traffic stop. The same man who ran him out of the department, cost him everything. And now that same man was connected to a dog that flinched at chains and froze at the sound of boots. Moses hadn't just come into his life by chance. This was full circle. He left the clinic with a scanned printout of Moses's registration. It had 3 key pieces of info: a facility name, a contact, now marked inactive, and a final training location listed as Wilkins County Holding Grounds. He stared at the page for a long time in the truck. Wilkins County. That place still haunted him. He'd worked a case out there years ago, a rural kennel that claimed to train patrol dogs. but it always felt off, always smelled wrong. The barking never stopped, even at night, and there were sheds that no one was allowed near. He'd asked once. Sheriff Maddox had smiled and said, "You ask too many damn questions." That night, back at the cabin, he placed the papers on the table and lit a fire. Moses lay curled near the hearth. The man didn't speak. He didn't touch the food on his plate. He just sat there, staring at the report. All the pieces were there. Moses had been hurt by the same system that had spit him out. A black man discarded by the law. A dog destroyed by it. They weren't strangers. They were both victims of power in the wrong hands. He reached for the old box under his bed. Inside were fragments of a past he'd buried. Photos of academy graduation, his old badge, and a sealed envelope marked Internal Review, 2013. He hadn't opened it since the day he left, but tonight he did. Inside were copies of witness statements, complaints he had filed, rejections from superiors, and one memo with Clay Maddox's name at the top, handwritten in thick red ink. Dismiss. Uncooperative. He folded the papers and placed them beside Moses. "You and me," he whispered. "We both deserved better." Moses lifted his head. Their eyes met. And in that silence, something loud passed between them. Not just recognition? Purpose. The next morning came with a cold wind and a tension that didn't belong to the weather. He didn't take Moses on their usual short walk. He didn't heat the broth. Instead, he sat at the table, staring at the papers again. Moses's chip records, the shut-down training facility, and the old internal review documents from a decade ago. He picked up his phone, the one he hadn't used to call anyone in months, and dialed a number he'd promised himself he never would again. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, gravelly and sharp. "This is Lieutenant Warren." There was a pause. "Warren," he said. "It's Grant." The line went quiet. Then came a slow exhale. "Well, damn. I thought you were either dead or smart enough to stay gone. I need a favor." "That ain't what this sounds like." "It's not." Another pause. "You talking about Maddox?" Grant didn't answer. He didn't need to. Warren's voice dropped low. "What do you have?" "A name. A chip. A survivor." He looked at Moses lying beside the fireplace, his body still, his eyes open, listening. "I got proof," he said, "and I got motive." Warren was silent for a few seconds. Then, "I'll meet you. But you better be ready. This ain't a story folks are gonna clap for. This'll bring out roaches you forgot existed." Grant nodded. "I'm ready." He wasn't, but he had to be. Later that day, he met Warren in a small diner on the edge of Wilkins County. Warren hadn't aged well, face harder, eyes colder. But when he saw the documents, he didn't blink. He flipped through the training facility records, photos of Moses's injuries, and finally, the scan result. "This ain't just abuse," he said. "This is operational misconduct. This dog was used." Grant nodded. "And I think he remembers." Warren looked at him. "What do you want, Eli?" "Pressure, internal affairs, a reopened investigation, something official that makes noise." "And what if it doesn't go anywhere?" Grant stared out the diner window. "Then I'll make noise myself." Warren smirked, but not with amusement. More like respect. "You always were too quiet to be ignored," he said. "I'll get the wheels turning." But you should know, Maddox is protected. Politically, financially, he's got connections. Then I'll break them. Back at the cabin that night, Grant printed duplicates of everything and stuffed them into a folder. On the front, he wrote one word: evidence. He looked over at Moses, who was sitting upright now, tail still, posture alert. He didn't cower at every sound anymore, but he still didn't wag his tail. Healing had started, but it wasn't finished. That folder wasn't just paperwork. It was a spark, and Eli knew sparks were dangerous in a system full of dry lies and old secrets. The next day, a letter arrived, unsigned, postmarked from inside Wilkins County. No return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 2016. Local officer cleared of misconduct in K-9 training probe. The officer in the photo? Clay Maddox, smiling. Eli stared at it for a long time, then slowly lit a match. The paper curled into ash in the sink. He turned to Moses. "We're not letting him bury this again." He knew what had to happen next. But it would require more than documents, more than phone calls. It would take confrontation, public, loud, and unignorable. The time for silence was over. And Moses, broken, betrayed, but still breathing, was the only witness left who carried the truth in every scar. And Eli? He was done hiding. The town square looked different under the weight of truth. It was a community fundraiser, flags on light poles, folding chairs, cheap hot dogs, and a band playing somewhere in the background. Kids laughed, cameras flashed. County officials smiled in pressed uniforms, shaking hands with people they didn't care to remember. And there he was, Sheriff Clay Maddox, clean shave, white Stetson, gold badge catching the sun like it deserved the spotlight. Eli Grant stood on the edge of the crowd. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't bring a speech. He brought Moses. The crowd noticed the dog first, limping but tall, the jagged scars visible through his short fur. Then they noticed the man holding the leash, walking with quiet purpose through the crowd that instinctively moved aside. No music now, no noise, just silence growing heavy. Clay turned just as Eli stopped 20 feet in front of him. Their eyes locked. Eli didn't flinch. He bent down slowly and placed his palm on Moses's back, steadying him. "This dog," Eli said, voice firm and low, but loud enough to travel, "was trained by your department, tortured by your people, broken under your name." The microphone at the sheriff's podium crackled as whispers swept through the crowd. Maddox's smile wavered. "I don't know what you think you're." Eli held up a manila folder. "Chip data, medical records, vet reports, eyewitness testimony. Do you know what this says?" He tossed it onto the podium with a thud. "It says you turned animals into weapons, and men like me into ghosts." Maddox's hand twitched near his belt, near his badge, but he didn't reach for anything. He couldn't, because the cameras were rolling now. Phones were up. Journalists edged closer. And Moses, silent and still, stared directly at him. The growl was quiet, barely a vibration in his throat, but it shook Maddox to his core. "He remembers you," Eli said, "and so do I." The sheriff tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat like they no longer belonged there. A county official whispered to an aide. A news anchor leaned into the mic. One deputy stepped away from the podium, unsure of what side of history he stood on. And in that moment, the room didn't belong to the sheriff anymore. It belonged to the man he tried to erase. Eli didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just turned, placed his hand gently on Moses's side, and walked away, slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of truth do what guns and fists never could. By that evening, the video had already gone viral. Black veteran confronts racist sheriff with abused K9 at public event. The headlines spread faster than any badge could bury them. Internal Affairs opened a case. State investigations were launched. Maddox was placed on immediate administrative leave. And old names, old cases, old voices started rising from the ashes. One by one, the system had cracked. And it all began with a quiet hand, raised in silence, and a dog that refused to be forgotten. The wind was softer now. Days had passed since the confrontation, but something in the air had shifted, like the weight on Eli's chest had finally loosened. Not completely, just enough to let him breathe without flinching. The cabin no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a beginning. Moses slept deeper now. No sudden starts. No growls in the middle of the night. Just quiet breathing, stretched out by the fire like he finally believed he wasn't in danger. But Eli knew the job wasn't finished. Justice had been triggered, yes. But justice without legacy was just noise. And this story needed to mean something more. He started clearing the land behind the cabin, slowly at first. Just the tall weeds, the broken fence, the rotted timber. He rebuilt it one board at a time, fenced off a stretch of earth that reached out to the woods. A place not for chains, not for discipline, but for running, for healing. He didn't build kennels. He built space, a sanctuary. The first to walk through the gate was Moses. No leash, no hesitation. He limped into the open space, paused, looked back at Eli once, then ran. Not fast, not gracefully, but free. Eli stood by the gate, hands on his hips, watching that damaged body carry itself across fresh ground like it finally belonged somewhere. People from nearby towns started showing up. They came quietly, one by one. Some brought dogs. Some brought stories. Some brought tears. One woman left a folded letter on the porch. It said, "This dog belonged to my brother. He was never the same after the program. I couldn't save him. Maybe now you can." Eli didn't reply. He didn't have to. The sanctuary didn't advertise, didn't need a name. But word traveled about the black man in the woods who took in the dogs no one else wanted, the ones trained to fear, to attack, to break. And with every dog that crossed through that gate, Eli felt a part of himself repair. One morning, a little black girl came with her grandmother. She stared at Moses, wide-eyed. "Can he be mine someday?" she whispered. Eli smiled, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "No, baby," he said gently. "He belongs to all of us now." That night, Eli sat on the porch, boots resting on the rail, a cup of coffee in his hand, and Moses curled at his feet, breathing steady, eyes closed, not watching the door, not listening for footsteps, just resting. And Eli, once discarded by the system, once buried by silence, was no longer invisible. Not because of revenge, but because he turned pain into purpose and made sure that no one, not man, not dog, had to carry their scars alone again. As for Sheriff Maddox, the name no longer held power. It held consequences. His badge was surrendered. His name investigated. And his silence? It was no longer protection. It was evidence. Eli never looked back, because forward was finally something worth walking toward. And Moses, the broken dog no one wanted? He wasn't just a rescue anymore. He was the reason everything changed.